All right, let's talk about level drain. I don't think I can cover all the different things that can come up, but I'm just trying to cover some of the more basic things. Level drain and undead. Once again, when a character is hit by a level drain, the attack itself may do some damage, and then there's the loss of an experience level. And what does this represent? Is it physical damage? Well, it doesn't have to be. Let's say, for example, you have a character that's above first level, and this attack from the white comes in. It's going to do you 1 to 4 points of damage plus energy drain. So let's say that you are hit and you lose a couple of hit points. You're still alive. You're then drained for a level, and you lose a level's worth of hit points, and you determine what that is. And then you're still alive. What does that mean? Well, it might mean that your character was scared nearly to death. It can mean that this creature's claws came right for your throat. You threw up your hands in defense and battered them aside, but the near-death experience has terrified you. Or maybe its fingers closed about your neck and started to choke you to death, and you managed to push him away and push him off. Again, the traumatic event has changed you. You were so horrified by this unnatural and horrific experience that you have psychological damage, like a sanity loss as a result. And you're so shaken up after the incident that you aren't as sharp as you were when you first encountered this terrible thing. So that could be part of the level loss. That's why if anyone has ever been through a traumatic event, it can shake you up. It can affect your memory. It can affect your coordination. It can affect your bodily functions. It can affect your sleep. You are damaged from the event, and it takes time to recover. It takes time to bring yourself back to normalcy and regain your sanity and regain your, recover physically, regain your confidence, all of these things. So along with this level drain, it could represent this feeling of great despair that you have. Let's talk about clerical healing and healing spells. Healing spells don't necessarily have to mean that the cleric is touching some open, gaping wound and knitting it back together and a light shines out of his hands. That doesn't have to be that. A character can be badly damaged and have lost many hit points and not have a mark on him. So what is the character healing? Well, the cleric and the nature of the healing magic is divine. It's a blessing, right? And so it could be that you are restoring faith, you're restoring confidence, you're restoring energy into that person that has become so drained or so full of despair. You bring some of their sanity back, whatever it is. You renew their faith, many different things, recover their stamina. All of that can be given from the blessing of the cleric who is healing them. So it doesn't have to be just always knitting bones and tissue back together. All right, this last little bit is a little bonus I've tacked on here about armor class. You perhaps have seen in different versions of different role-playing games, including different versions of Dungeons & Dragons or the D20 system, damage reduction. People say and argue, I've seen it on the net many times, armor doesn't make you harder to hit. It makes it harder for you to be damaged. Well, again, along the same lines, they say in 3rd edition and other editions about the feint, using the feint skill to feint in combat and cause your opponent to be flat-footed. Or it could be even much more vicious in something like the Conan D20 version, where they lost all their active defenses. It became quite overpowered. So therefore, damage reduction needed to be really high in order to protect you. If you're familiar with that game, then you know what I'm talking about. But damage reduction, things like feinting and that kind of stuff, it's already in the game. It's already there. It's just a bit more abstract. As your character levels up, they gain a better chance to hit their opponent. That's their fighting skill. That's their ability to feint and make openings and get in through the open attack, to get into the opening and do damage. That's already represented in the game by the increase of your attack skill. Hit points. Hit points represent your ability to defend against that kind of thing. So a feint attack that would have opened up a guard and caused him to be killed with a single sword thrust, with you, you've seen that before, and you know how to parry that aside, and that's your hit points. Your hit points are protecting you. So what about damage reduction? You don't need that either. It's already in the game. And this was something that I was doing years ago as a young dungeon master that I don't know if a lot of other people did. I would be curious to hear. But I made a note of my players' armor class, and I wanted to know what their armor class was if they weren't wearing their armor, if they didn't have on their protection. So essentially it was just armor class 10, and then if they had a dexterity bonus. And I would note that down. And then if they had on something like chainmail, then their armor class would drop another 5 points or so. 4 or 5 points. What are we talking about? Going from 10 to 5. So what I would see there is that window, taking them from armor class 10 down to 5. If an attack fell within that range, then that's their damage reduction. So they have on chainmail, right? Let's say a goblin makes an attack with a sword and completely misses them with a terrible roll. Then no hit, no damage, nothing. Let's say then a goblin would have hit them with this attack roll if they had not been wearing chainmail. Maybe it would have hit them and damaged them if they had on leather armor, but it wasn't good enough to hit chainmail armor. Then that's damage reduction. I would have said the attack strikes your body, but the sword blow grazes along your mail, and you're thankful that your chainmail protected you. It would have sliced you open otherwise. That's your damage reduction. It's right there. The armor kept you from being damaged. So therefore, heavier armor, better protection. So then you go down, and let's say the goblin rolls well enough to hit you despite the fact that you're wearing chainmail armor. The interesting thing is, if you had more than enough hit points to survive the attack, I might say that you weren't hit. I might say that you actually, due to your experience and skill, successfully sidestep and parry the blow aside, creating an opening for your next attack. Something like that. So armor class and the type of armor you're wearing or the type of protections you're wearing can be used and described in a way as damage reduction. It's just up to you, the DM, to describe it in a clever way. My players used to love that. It made their armor feel important. And as their armor was battered, as these hits came in, but they weren't being damaged, I kind of started to scratch out like little notches beside their armor. And when they took enough notches that it equaled to the points of armor that they were protected by, then I started to degrade their armor slightly. And therefore, you get a reason to use something like the mend spell, or go into town and pay some gold to get your armor repaired. So I would do something like, if chainmail takes you down this many points and you took 4 or 5 hits on your chainmail, it might degrade a level and become as protective as ring mail or scale mail. Sorry, scale mail. And so that was the way I did it. It added some realism and something interesting to the game. So again, about hit points and the damage reduction and all that, putting it all together, it was the one thing that kept players coming back and asking me to Dungeon Master again the next week. And I think it was something that I was influenced by reading Conan novels, enjoying sword and sorcery movies, Excalibur and Beastmaster and all these other things. I just tried to bring in some of that excitement into the game. And I enjoyed doing that through the descriptions of the actions. So if a character was attacked and I simply got a little lazy and I said, all right, he hits you for 4 damage, I remember my friend sitting across the table and saying, no, tell me what happens. and then I had to switch on creative mode and describe in detail what happened during the attack. So it's very fun. It brings a lot of life and enjoyment to your game instead of just becoming a hit point grind. So please think about that when you're playing and when you're interpreting hit points. I think this can work in many different editions. There are still certain creatures in certain situations where you'll have to be sort of creative. Other editions or versions that may have included damage reduction rules, or that may have included multiple levels of poisoning and this kind of thing, you may have to do something differently. But I just wanted you to be able to see, in case you haven't, the great depth that was already in the game if you tap into it. Damage reduction is there. Hit points as potential damage is there. The save versus death mechanic has a reason to be there. All these kind of things. So anyway, just sharing my thoughts with you on this, and hope you enjoyed it. I'll catch you later.